The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in late November, right when I was finishing my second cup of coffee and watching the first snow of the season dust the pine trees outside my kitchen window in Eagle Ridge, Montana. I'm Vincent Saunders, and I'd been living in this peaceful mountain community for 3 years, running my snow removal and construction business without a care in the world until that moment. The envelope had urgent stamped across it in red ink, which immediately set off alarm bells. I tore it open and started reading, my blood pressure climbing with every sentence. The letter was from Patricia Henderson, president of the Eagle Ridge Community HOA, and it informed me in the most condescending language possible that, as a resident of the community, I was being assigned mandatory snow removal duties for all community roads starting immediately. According to the letter, each homeowner would be rotated through a schedule, and my rotation started this Friday. I was expected to clear approximately 12 miles of winding mountain roads within 24 hours of any snowfall exceeding 2 inches. I read it 3 times, convinced I was missing something. The letter mentioned nothing about equipment, compensation, or the fact that clearing 12 miles of mountain roads required specialized machinery that cost more than most people's houses. It simply stated that this was my civic duty as a member of the community, and that failure to comply would result in daily fines of $500 plus the cost of hiring outside contractors, which would be billed directly to my property. I grabbed my phone and called my neighbor, Doug Martinez, who'd lived in Eagle Ridge for over a decade. "Did you get one of these insane letters from the HOA?" I asked. "Oh yeah," Doug said, and I could hear the amusement in his voice. "Got mine yesterday. I'm scheduled for January." "Good luck with that, by the way." "What do you mean, good luck? This is impossible. How does Patricia expect anyone to clear 12 miles of mountain roads without proper equipment?" Doug laughed. "Vincent, Patricia doesn't think things through. She never has. Last year, she tried to fine everyone who didn't plant flowers in their front yards, forgetting that we're at 7,000 feet elevation, and half the flowers she wanted won't even grow here. The year before that, she attempted to mandate that everyone paint their houses the same shade of beige. The woman's got more authority than sense. So what did people do? Most folks just ignored her until she moved on to her next crusade. But you, my friend, you've got a problem. Patricia's been gunning for you ever since you opposed her plan to cut down those old-growth trees near the community center." That was true. 6 months ago, Patricia had wanted to remove a stand of 100-year-old ponderosa pines because she thought they blocked the view. I'd pointed out at the community meeting that those trees were protected and that removing them would result in serious erosion problems. She'd been coldly polite to me ever since, which apparently meant coldly vindictive. "So what should I do?" I asked. "Well, you've got 2 choices. You can ignore it and deal with the fines, or you can comply. But here's the thing, Vincent. You actually could comply if you wanted to." "What are you talking about? You own that big Peterbilt plow truck, don't you? The one you use for your business." I looked out my window at the massive red and white truck sitting in my driveway, equipped with a heavy-duty snow plow and salt spreader. "Yeah, so you're the only person in the entire county who owns a commercial-grade plow truck. The county contracts with you every winter, don't they?" The realization hit me like a bucket of ice water. Doug was absolutely right. When I'd moved to Eagle Ridge 3 years ago, I'd brought my entire snow removal business with me from Minnesota. The county had been thrilled because they'd previously had to contract with companies from Missoula, over 100 miles away. I had an exclusive contract with them for all county road maintenance, and my Peterbilt was indeed the only commercial plow truck within a 100-mile radius. A few locals had pickup trucks with small residential plows, but nothing that could handle 12 miles of mountain roads efficiently. "Doug, you're a genius," I said. "I need to make some calls." I spent the next hour on the phone, first with my lawyer, then with the county road commissioner. The conversation with the commissioner, Bill Thornton, was particularly enlightening. "Vincent, I heard about that HOA letter," Bill said. "Patricia actually called me last week asking about county snow removal regulations. I told her the county maintains the main highways, but those community roads in Eagle Ridge are private property and the HOA's responsibility." She seemed pretty pleased with herself. "Did you tell her how much it costs to maintain 12 miles of mountain roads?" I tried to. She wasn't interested in the details, just wanted confirmation that the HOA could legally require residents to do the work. "And can they? That's between you and your lawyer, but I will tell you this. Your contract with the county is exclusive within county boundaries, and those community roads, while private, are still within our jurisdiction for permitting purposes. Anyone operating commercial snow removal equipment on them would need proper licensing and insurance. Your truck is registered and permitted through the county. A regular citizen with a pickup truck, that's different, that's personal use. But what Patricia's asking residents to do crosses into commercial territory." I thanked Bill and hung up, my mind racing. My lawyer, Sarah Chen, had been even more direct. The HOA's demand was likely unenforceable on multiple grounds, including the fact that it required specialized equipment and expertise that couldn't reasonably be expected of homeowners. But she'd also warned me that fighting it would be expensive and time-consuming. "Patricia Henderson sounds like the type who'll drag this out just on principle," Sarah had said. "My advice, let her make the first move. If she actually tries to fine you, we'll have grounds for a countersuit. But until then, you're just arguing with a letter." The snow started falling Thursday night, big fat flakes that built up fast. By Friday morning, we had 8 inches and it was still coming down. I was up at 4 a.m., climbing into my Peterbilt and starting my county route. The truck rumbled to life, diesel engine growling in the pre-dawn darkness. I loved this truck. It was a beast, weighing in at 30,000 pounds with the plow attached, equipped with GPS, a heated cab, and enough power to move mountains of snow. I spent all day Friday clearing county roads, finishing up around 6 p.m. The community roads in Eagle Ridge hadn't been touched. I drove through on my way home and saw cars struggling through the deep snow, residents trying to navigate the unplowed streets. I felt bad for them, but it wasn't my scheduled day yet according to the HOA's insane rotation, and I wasn't about to volunteer. The phone call came Saturday morning. I didn't recognize the number but answered anyway. "Mr. Saunders, this is Patricia Henderson." Her voice was sharp and nasal, like a particularly irritated schoolteacher. "I'm calling to inform you that you have failed to fulfill your assigned community duty. The roads were supposed to be cleared within 24 hours of snowfall exceeding 2 inches. We received 8 inches on Thursday night, which means you should have cleared the roads by Friday night at the latest." "Patricia, I was clearing county roads on Friday. That's my job and I have a contract." "Your contract with the county is irrelevant to your obligations to this community. You are being assessed a $500 fine for each day the roads remain uncleared. That's $500 for Friday, and another $500 for today, unless the roads are cleared by midnight tonight. Have you considered that maybe your snow removal plan isn't realistic? I've considered that you signed a covenant when you purchased your property agreeing to abide by all HOA rules and regulations. The board voted on this snow removal schedule, and it's now official policy. You can either comply or continue accruing fines. The choice is yours, Mr. Saunders." She hung up before I could respond. I sat there staring at my phone, anger building in my chest. I'd dealt with difficult clients before, but Patricia was something else entirely. She had that particular blend of authority and ignorance that made for truly dangerous leadership. I called Sarah Chen. "She's actually doing it. She's assessing fines." "Good," Sarah said. "Let her. Don't pay them, don't acknowledge them, just keep documentation of everything. We'll need it for court." "Court? I was hoping to avoid that. Vincent, people like Patricia don't back down when you ask nicely. They back down when a judge tells them they have no choice. Trust me on this." The next letter arrived Monday, this time delivered by hand. A teenage kid knocked on my door and thrust an envelope at me before hurrying back to his car. Inside was a bill for $1,000, representing fines for Friday and Saturday, along with another stern warning about my community obligations. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the bill, when my phone rang. It was Bill Thornton from the county. "Vincent, I'm hearing rumors that Patricia is fining you for not plowing community roads. Is that true?" "Unfortunately, yes." "Well, I've got something you need to know. Patricia called my office this morning trying to get county equipment rental information. When my secretary told her we don't rent out county equipment to private citizens, she asked about private contractors. Specifically, she wanted to know who else in the area has commercial snow removal capabilities." "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That you're it. The only commercial operator within 100 miles. She was not happy about that." I thanked Bill and hung up, a plan beginning to form in my mind. If Patricia wanted the roads plowed so badly, and I was the only one who could do it professionally, then maybe it was time to let her figure that out the hard way. The snow kept falling throughout the week. By Wednesday, we had another foot, and the community roads in Eagle Ridge were becoming genuinely impassable. I continued doing my county routes, keeping the main highways clear while the HOA roads deteriorated. My phone started ringing constantly with calls from neighbors. Doug called Tuesday evening. "Vincent, I know you're making a point here, but people are having trouble getting to work. Mrs. Patterson down the street slid into a ditch this morning. Is she okay?" "She's fine, just shaken up, but this is getting serious." "I know, Doug, and I feel terrible about it. But Patricia created this situation. She's the one who demanded that regular homeowners with no equipment and no training handle commercial snow removal. I'm just following her schedule. My assigned day hasn't come up in the rotation yet." "When is your day?" "According to the schedule she sent out, I'm not up until December 15th. That's 2 weeks away." Doug was quiet for a moment. "She really didn't think this through, did she?" "No, she didn't." Another letter arrived Thursday, and this one was different. Instead of Patricia's usual condescending tone, it was a formal notice from the HOA board announcing an emergency community meeting for Saturday at 2 p.m. The notice stated that the meeting would address ongoing snow removal challenges and community safety concerns. I marked it on my calendar and continued my work. Friday brought another 8 inches, and by Friday night, the Eagle Ridge community roads had nearly 2 feet of accumulated snow. The county roads I maintained were clear and safe, but getting from the county roads into the community was like entering a different world. Cars were abandoned along the sides of streets. People were parking at the community entrance and walking to their homes. It was a mess, and it was entirely Patricia's doing. Saturday afternoon, I walked into the Eagle Ridge Community Center to find every seat taken. The room was packed with angry, frustrated residents, many of whom I recognized from around the neighborhood. Patricia stood at the front with 3 other board members, looking considerably less confident than she'd sounded on the phone. She called the meeting to order, her voice tight. "Thank you all for coming. As you know, we've been experiencing some challenges with our new snow removal program. The board has been reviewing the situation and considering various solutions." "Solutions?" a woman in the front row shouted. "How about you stop fining people for not doing impossible jobs?" A rumble of agreement went through the crowd. Patricia's face reddened. "The assignments are not impossible. They simply require community cooperation and effort. Unfortunately, some residents have chosen not to fulfill their obligations." Every head in the room turned to look at me. I stayed silent, letting Patricia dig her hole deeper. "Mr. Saunders," Patricia said, pointing at me, "has been particularly uncooperative. Despite owning professional snow removal equipment, he has refused to assist his community in any way. His selfishness has directly contributed to the current situation." I stood up slowly. "Patricia, I've refused nothing. According to the schedule you sent out, my assigned day isn't until December 15th. I've been following your rules exactly as you wrote them. You could have volunteered to help earlier. Could I have? Let me ask you something. Did you check with your insurance company before implementing this policy? Because I did. I called them this week. Any HOA that requires residents to perform commercial-grade snow removal without proper equipment, training, and insurance is opening itself up to massive liability. If someone gets hurt trying to clear these roads with inadequate equipment, or if they damage property, or if someone slides off an improperly cleared road and sues, the HOA is responsible." The room went very quiet. Patricia's face had gone from red to white. "We consulted our legal documentation." "Did you?" "Because I consulted with my lawyer, and she found your policy interesting. Specifically, she found it interesting that you're attempting to mandate commercial services without compensation, without providing necessary equipment, and without verifying that residents have the capability to perform the work safely and legally." She used words like unenforceable and potential grounds for a lawsuit. One of the other board members, a nervous-looking man named Robert Finch, leaned toward Patricia and whispered something urgently. She shook her head, but Robert kept whispering. Finally, Patricia straightened. "The board will take a 15-minute recess to discuss the matter." They filed out of the room, and immediately the community center erupted in conversation. Doug made his way over to me, grinning. "You really did your homework, didn't you?" Patricia tried to muscle me into doing free labor using threats and intimidation. I don't respond well to that approach. "So what happens now?" "That depends on how reasonable she's willing to be." The board returned 20 minutes later, and Patricia's demeanor had changed significantly. She looked like she'd swallowed something bitter. "After consulting with the board," she said stiffly, "we've decided to temporarily suspend the community snow removal rotation and explore alternative solutions. However, Mr. Saunders, you still owe the HOA for fines already assessed." I stood again. "Actually, Patricia, I don't. Those fines were based on a policy that my lawyer believes is unenforceable. I won't be paying them, and if you attempt to place a lien on my property or take any other action, I'll file a countersuit for harassment and abuse of HOA authority. Furthermore, I'll be requesting that the county investigate your insurance compliance, because I'm fairly certain you don't have coverage for the liability exposure you've created." Robert Finch stood up abruptly. "Patricia, can we speak privately? Now." They left the room again, along with the other 2 board members. This time they were gone for almost 30 minutes. When they returned, Robert was the one who spoke. On behalf of the board, I want to apologize to everyone for the confusion and inconvenience this week has caused. We made an error in judgment with the snow removal policy, and we're going to rescind it effective immediately. All fines that have been assessed are hereby waived. We're going to form a committee to research proper solutions for community snow removal that are safe, legal, and fair to everyone. Patricia stood rigid beside him, clearly furious but unable to argue. The relief in the room was palpable. People started standing, gathering their things, talking in animated voices. As the crowd dispersed, Robert approached me. "Mr. Saunders, could I speak with you for a moment?" We stepped to the side of the room. Robert looked exhausted. "I want to apologize personally. I should have pushed back harder when Patricia proposed this plan, but she can be very persuasive. The truth is, we do need a solution for the community roads. Is there any chance you'd be willing to help? Help how? Would you be willing to provide snow removal services for the community roads? We'd pay you, of course. A proper contract with proper compensation." I considered it. I'd need to see numbers. 12 miles of mountain roads, multiple clearings per week during winter, salt and sand for ice control. It's not cheap. I understand. Could you put together a proposal? Sure. Give me a few days to work up the costs. We shook hands and Robert hurried after Patricia, who was leaving the community center like a ship under full sail, her spine rigid with anger. Doug walked out with me. "Well, that was entertaining. Think you'll actually do the work? If they pay me fairly, absolutely. I've got the equipment and it's good money. I just wasn't about to do it for free because Patricia thought she could bully me into it." Over the next few days, I put together a detailed proposal for the HOA. I calculated fuel costs, equipment wear and tear, time, salt and sand materials, insurance, and a reasonable profit margin. The total came to $32,000 for the winter season, which ran from November through March. It was a fair price for the amount of work involved, actually lower than what the HOA would pay if they contracted with a company from Missoula. I submitted the proposal on Tuesday. Wednesday morning, my phone rang at 7 a.m. It was Patricia. "Mr. Saunders, I've reviewed your proposal and it's absolutely outrageous. $32,000. That's over $600 per week." "That's correct. That's what professional snow removal costs. We could buy our own plow truck for that amount." "You could buy a used truck, yes. But then you'd need someone licensed and insured to operate it. You'd need storage for it. You'd need maintenance, fuel, and equipment repairs. And you'd need to pay someone to actually do the plowing, which means either hiring a full-time employee or contracting with someone who, spoiler alert, would charge you basically the same amount I'm charging. This is extortion. No, Patricia, this is business. You want a professional service, you pay professional rates. If you don't want to hire me, that's fine. Feel free to shop around, but I think you'll find that I'm actually your best option." She hung up on me again. I wasn't surprised. What did surprise me was the knock on my door Thursday evening. I opened it to find 3 people standing on my porch: Robert Finch, another board member named Linda Wu, and a younger man I didn't recognize. "Mr. Saunders," Robert said, "this is Jason Henderson, Patricia's son. May we come in?" I stepped aside and let them enter. We settled in my living room, and an awkward silence stretched out for a moment before Jason spoke. "Mr. Saunders, I need to apologize for my mother. She called me after she spoke with you yesterday, absolutely furious about your proposal. I asked her to send it to me, and I reviewed it. I'm a contractor myself, down in Billings, and I understand equipment costs. Your proposal is not only fair, it's actually quite reasonable." "Thank you," I said, surprised. "Does your mother know you're here?" "No," Robert cut in, "and that's part of why we're here. Patricia has become difficult. She's been president of the HOA for 4 years, and each year she's gotten more controlling and more resistant to input from the rest of the board. This snow removal fiasco was the final straw. We held a vote this afternoon, and Patricia has been removed as president. Linda is taking over." Linda Wu, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, nodded. "We're going to be making some changes to how the HOA operates, including implementing some checks and balances that should have been in place all along. But first, we need to deal with our immediate problem. Mr. Saunders, we'd like to accept your proposal. Can you start immediately? I can start tomorrow morning. I'll need a contract drawn up and a deposit of 1/3 of the total cost." "That's acceptable," Linda said. "I'll have our lawyer draft the contract tonight. We'll expedite this." They stood to leave, but Jason lingered after Robert and Linda had gone. "Mr. Saunders, I really am sorry about all this. My mother means well, but she gets an idea in her head and can't see past it. She was so proud of herself for coming up with this snow removal rotation plan. She thought she was being fair by spreading the responsibility around. She didn't consider whether it was actually possible. No, she didn't. That's always been her weakness. All vision, no practical implementation. I tried to talk to her about it when she first mentioned the idea to me, but she wouldn't listen." He sighed. "Anyway, I'm glad you're going to help the community. And for what it's worth, I'm going to have a long talk with my mother about how to treat people." After he left, I sat on my couch feeling a strange mix of vindication and exhaustion. I'd won, but it had been a frustrating battle that never should have happened in the first place. The contract arrived by email at 11 p.m. that night. I reviewed it carefully, had Sarah Chen look it over via a quick phone call, and signed it electronically. The deposit hit my bank account Friday morning, and by Friday afternoon, I was clearing the Eagle Ridge community roads for the first time. It took me 6 hours to do a thorough job. 2 feet of accumulated, packed snow is no joke, even with a commercial plow truck. I worked methodically, clearing each road section by section, following up with sand on the steeper hills and curves. By the time I finished, the community roads were cleaner than they'd been all winter. The response was immediate. My phone started buzzing with text messages from neighbors thanking me. Doug called to say I was a hero. Even people I barely knew were waving at me when I drove through the neighborhood. But Patricia wasn't done yet. Saturday morning, I found a letter taped to my door. Not mailed, taped. I opened it and read Patricia's angry, handwritten scrawl. "You may have convinced the board to waste community funds on your overpriced services, but everyone will know that you manipulated this situation for your own profit. You deliberately let the roads become dangerous just so you could swoop in and demand payment. You're no hero, Mr. Saunders. You're an opportunist and a manipulator." I sighed and took a photo of the letter, adding it to the growing file of Patricia's communications. Then I called Sarah Chen. "She's not letting this go," I said after reading the letter to her. "What do I do? Keep documentation of everything. If she escalates to slander or starts actively interfering with your contract, we'll have grounds for a restraining order. But for now, she's just venting. Let her." The next few weeks were tense but manageable. I kept the community roads clear, responding to snowfall promptly and professionally. Most residents were thrilled with the service. A few, apparently friends of Patricia's, gave me cold looks when I drove past, but nobody directly confronted me. Linda Wu, the new HOA president, was a breath of fresh air compared to Patricia. She was organized, professional, and actually listened when people spoke. She sent out regular email updates to the community, established a suggestion box for resident concerns, and scheduled monthly meetings with open forums for discussion. Patricia, meanwhile, seemed to be lurking in the background, still attending HOA meetings but sitting in the back row with her arms crossed, radiating disapproval. The real trouble started in January. I was finishing up a morning plow run when I noticed something wrong with one of the community roads. Someone had placed large rocks across the roadway, blocking passage. They weren't natural, they'd clearly been carried there and positioned deliberately. I got out of my truck and moved the rocks, which took about 20 minutes. I thought it might be kids pulling a prank, so I didn't think much of it. But the next day, it happened again. Different road, same situation. Large rocks blocking the path. The third day, I found wooden boards studded with nails positioned in the middle of a road, partially covered by fresh snow. If I hadn't been paying attention, I could have driven right over them and destroyed my tires. I called Linda Wu immediately. Someone is sabotaging the roads. This is the third incident in 3 days. Oh my God, Linda said. Are you serious? Completely. I'm taking photos right now. This last one could have caused serious damage to my truck or injured someone. Those boards were deliberately hidden in the snow. I'm calling the sheriff. This is beyond HOA business now. Sheriff Tom Brennan arrived 30 minutes later. He was a weathered man in his 60s who'd been sheriff of our county for longer than I'd been alive. He examined the boards, took photos, and talked to me about the previous incidents. "Who do you think is doing this?" he asked. "I have a suspicion, but no proof." "Let me guess. Patricia Henderson. You know her," Sheriff Brennan chuckled without humor. "Everyone in law enforcement around here knows Patricia. She's called us dozens of times over the years for what she calls violations of various rules. People parking on the street in front of their own houses, kids playing too loudly, neighbors with Christmas decorations she doesn't like. We're usually able to explain that those aren't actually crimes, but she never seems to understand the distinction between HOA rules and actual laws. So you think she's capable of this? Capable? Maybe. But proving it is another matter. I'll look into it, but unless we catch her in the act or find solid evidence, there's not much I can do. In the meantime, I'd suggest being extra careful when you're clearing roads. Check for obstacles before you plow through an area. The sabotage continued for another week. Rocks, boards, once even a section of chain-link fence dragged across a road. Each time I documented it, called Linda and the sheriff, and spent extra time clearing the obstacles. It was costing me time and money, and more importantly, it was dangerous. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman who'd slid into a ditch back when the roads weren't being plowed, called me one evening. "Mr. Saunders, I think I know who's been causing trouble with the roads. I saw something this afternoon that seemed odd." "What did you see, Mrs. Patterson?" "I was driving home around 3, and I saw Patricia Henderson's car parked near Elk Ridge Road. She was standing beside it, looking around like she was checking to see if anyone was watching. Then she opened her trunk and pulled out what looked like a bag of rocks. I didn't think much of it at first, but after I heard about the obstacles you've been finding, I put 2 and 2 together." "Did you see her actually place anything on the road?" "No, I'm sorry. I had to keep driving because the road was narrow and there was a car behind me. But it seemed very suspicious." I thanked Mrs. Patterson and immediately called Sheriff Brennan, who promised to increase patrols in the area. I also invested in a dashcam for my plow truck, something I should have done years ago. 2 days later, the dashcam paid off. I was doing an evening plow run after a light snowfall when I came around a curve on Elk Ridge Road and saw Patricia Henderson in the beam of my headlights. She was dragging a large log across the road, clearly struggling with its weight. When my lights hit her, she froze like a deer, her face a mask of shock and anger. I stopped the truck, made sure the dashcam was recording, and got out. "Patricia, what are you doing?" This log fell across the road. I'm moving it. That log has fresh saw marks on it. It didn't fall there naturally. Her expression shifted from shock to defiance. "You can't prove anything." "Actually, I can. My truck has a dashcam that's been recording this entire encounter. I've also documented every single incident of sabotage over the past 2 weeks. Sheriff Brennan is going to be very interested in this footage." For a moment, I thought she might try to run. Her eyes darted to her car, parked just off the road about 20 feet away. But then her shoulders slumped, and something seemed to break inside her. "You ruined everything," she said, her voice bitter. "This community was running perfectly fine before you showed up with your opinions and your demands. I had a system, I had order, and you undermined me at every turn. Patricia, you tried to force people to do impossible jobs without proper equipment. That's not order, that's chaos. I was trying to build community spirit. I was trying to get people to work together instead of just throwing money at problems. By threatening them with fines. By demanding they risk their safety and their property. That's not community building, Patricia. That's bullying." Her face crumpled, and for a second I felt sorry for her. She wasn't evil, just so convinced of her own rightness that she couldn't see how her actions affected others. "I'm calling the sheriff," I said, pulling out my phone. "Wait." Her voice was small now, defeated. "Please, I'll stop. I'll leave you alone. I'll resign from the HOA board completely. Just don't call the police. It's too late for that. You've been committing criminal mischief, possibly vandalism, and creating dangerous conditions that could have gotten someone killed. This isn't something I can just ignore." I called Sheriff Brennan, who arrived 15 minutes later with a deputy. Patricia stood beside her car the entire time, silent and pale. The sheriff reviewed my dashcam footage, examined the log, and took a statement from me about all the previous incidents. "Mrs. Henderson," Sheriff Brennan said finally, "I'm going to need you to come with me to the station. You're being charged with criminal mischief and reckless endangerment." "Reckless endangerment," Patricia's voice rose. "That's absurd. I was just trying to slow him down, make things difficult. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone." "Madam, you placed nail-studded boards in a roadway and covered them with snow. Mr. Saunders could have been injured. Another resident could have driven over them. That's textbook reckless endangerment." They put Patricia in the back of the sheriff's car. As they drove away, I stood in the cold Montana night, feeling drained. This wasn't how I'd wanted things to end. The news spread through Eagle Ridge like wildfire. By the next morning, everyone knew about Patricia's arrest. The community was split between those who were shocked and those who said they'd seen it coming for years. Linda Wu called an emergency HOA meeting for that Saturday. The community center was packed again, but the mood was somber rather than angry. "I want to address what happened with Patricia Henderson," Linda began. "Many of you have heard that she was arrested for sabotaging the community roads. I've spoken with Sheriff Brennan, and I can confirm that the charges are serious. The board wants everyone to know that we had no knowledge of her actions, and we condemn them completely. The safety of this community is our primary concern." "What happens now?" someone called out. "Patricia has resigned from the board, effective immediately. We're holding a special election next month to fill her position. In the meantime, we're reviewing all of our HOA policies to make sure nothing like this happens again. We're also establishing an oversight committee that will review any proposed policy changes before they're implemented." Robert Finch stood up. I also want to publicly apologize. I was on the board when Patricia pushed through that snow removal rotation, and I didn't fight hard enough against it. I knew it was unrealistic, but I let myself be convinced that we should at least try it. That was a failure of leadership on my part, and I'm sorry. The meeting continued for another hour, with various residents voicing concerns and suggestions. By the end, there was a sense that the community was moving forward, putting the Patricia drama behind them. But the legal process was just beginning. Patricia's arraignment was scheduled for early February. I attended, partly because I was a witness and partly because I wanted closure on the whole mess. Patricia stood before the judge looking diminished, her usual confidence completely absent. Her lawyer, a young woman from Missoula, entered a plea of not guilty and requested a trial date. The prosecutor, a stern man named David Kowalski, approached me after the hearing. "Mr. Saunders, I want you to know that we're taking this case seriously. Mrs. Henderson's actions could have resulted in serious injury or death. We'll be pursuing the reckless endangerment charges aggressively. What kind of sentence is she looking at? If convicted, potentially several years in prison, though more likely she'll get probation and community service given her age and lack of prior criminal history. But that's up to the judge." The trial was set for March, which meant I had to deal with the uncertainty hanging over everything for weeks. In the meantime, I continued clearing the community roads without incident. The winter was particularly harsh that year, with multiple major storms rolling through. My services were definitely earning their keep. I also started getting calls from other communities in the area, asking if I'd be interested in contracting with them for snow removal. Word had spread about the situation in Eagle Ridge, and apparently several other HOAs had realized they had the same problem. No real plan for maintaining their private roads during winter. By the time March arrived, I'd signed contracts with 3 additional communities and was seriously considering buying a second plow truck and hiring an employee. What had started as Patricia's vindictive attempt to bully me had accidentally launched a business expansion I'd been considering for years. The trial took 2 days. The prosecutor presented the dashcam footage, Mrs. Patterson's testimony about seeing Patricia with rocks in her trunk, and my documentation of all the sabotage incidents. Patricia's lawyer tried to argue that her client had been under emotional distress due to being removed from her position as HOA president, that she'd made poor decisions but never intended to hurt anyone. The jury deliberated for 3 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all charges. At sentencing, the judge was harsh but not cruel. "Mrs. Henderson, you held a position of trust in your community, and you abused that trust. Your actions were not only illegal but dangerous. However, I recognize that you have no prior criminal history and that you've expressed remorse for your actions. I'm sentencing you to 2 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and full restitution to Mr. Saunders for all damages and time lost due to your sabotage. You're also prohibited from holding any HOA board position for the next 5 years. Patricia accepted the sentence without comment. As we left the courthouse, her son Jason approached me again. "Mr. Saunders, I wanted to thank you for not pushing for a harsher sentence. The prosecutor told me you actually spoke on my mother's behalf, asking for leniency." "I did. Look, Jason, your mother made some terrible choices, but I don't think she's a bad person. She just got so locked into her own perspective that she couldn't see how wrong she was. I hope this is a wake-up call for her. I think it is. She's already started therapy, and she's talking about moving to Billings to be closer to me and my family. A fresh start might be good for her." We shook hands, and I walked out into the March sunshine feeling like a weight had been lifted. The whole ordeal had taken 4 months from start to finish, but it was finally over. Spring came to Eagle Ridge with the usual Montana drama. Warm days followed by surprise snowstorms, mud season turning the unpaved roads into chocolate soup, and the gradual greening of the mountains. My snow removal contract was officially over for the season, and I'd exceeded my revenue projections by 40% thanks to the additional communities I'd signed. The HOA under Linda Wu's leadership had transformed into something actually functional. They'd implemented reasonable policies, established clear procedures for proposing and voting on changes, and created an atmosphere where residents felt heard rather than bullied. The special election to fill Patricia's vacant board seat had drawn multiple candidates, all of them competent and engaged. In May, the community held a spring barbecue at the community center. It was a beautiful Saturday afternoon, and it seemed like everyone in Eagle Ridge turned out. I was manning one of the grills, flipping burgers and hot dogs, when Linda Wu approached with a plaque in her hands. "Vincent, can I borrow you for a minute? We have something we'd like to do." She led me to a small stage that had been set up for announcements. The crowd quieted down as Linda tapped the microphone. "Everyone, I want to take a moment to recognize someone who's made a real difference in our community this past year." When things were at their worst last winter, Vincent Saunders stood up for what was right, even when it would have been easier to just go along with an unfair policy. He provided professional, reliable snow removal services that kept our roads safe all winter long. And he handled a very difficult situation with grace and integrity. "Vincent, would you come up here?" I climbed onto the stage, feeling awkward and pleased at the same time. Linda handed me the plaque, which read, "Presented to Vincent Saunders in recognition of outstanding service to the Eagle Ridge community. Your professionalism, integrity, and dedication have made our neighborhood safer and stronger." The crowd applauded, and I saw Doug in the front row, grinning and giving me a thumbs up. I said a few words of thanks, something about being glad to help and looking forward to serving the community for years to come, and then escaped back to my grill before things could get too sentimental. Later that evening, as the barbecue was winding down, I sat at a picnic table with Doug and a few other neighbors, watching kids play on the community center lawn while the sun set behind the mountains. "You know," Doug said, "6 months ago, if someone had told me that Patricia Henderson would end up with a criminal record and you'd be the community hero, I wouldn't have believed them." "I'm not a hero," I said. "I just refuse to be pushed around." That's what makes you a hero in a place like this. HOAs can be great when they're run by reasonable people, but when someone like Patricia gets power, it takes guts to stand up to them. A lot of folks would have just paid the fines or moved away. I considered moving, I admitted. Early on, when this whole thing started, I thought about just selling and finding somewhere without an HOA. "What made you stay?" I looked around at the community center, the neighbors talking and laughing, the mountains rising majestically in the background. "This is a good place. Good people, beautiful location, peaceful. I didn't want to let one difficult person drive me away from all of that, and I guess I was stubborn enough to think I could make things better instead of just running." "Well, mission accomplished," Doug said, raising his beer bottle in a toast. To stubbornness and snow plows. We all clinked bottles, and I felt something settle inside me. This was home now, truly home, in a way it hadn't been before all the drama started. I'd fought for my place here, stood up for what was right, and earned the respect of my community. That meant something. The summer passed peacefully. I focused on the construction side of my business, building decks and doing renovation work for various clients. Patricia Henderson moved to Billings in June, and from what I heard through Jason, she was doing better. The therapy was helping, and the distance from Eagle Ridge seemed to be giving her perspective on everything that had happened. In August, I hired my first employee, a young guy named Marcus who just graduated from trade school and was looking to learn the snow removal business. I bought a second plow truck, a slightly smaller Ford F550 that would be perfect for residential areas, and as a backup for my Peterbilt. By the time November rolled around again and the first snow started falling, I was ready. My contract with Eagle Ridge was renewed, along with the 3 other communities I'd signed in the spring. I'd added 2 more communities over the summer, and my little one-man operation had become a legitimate business with an employee, multiple trucks, and a full schedule. The first snow of the season came on November 20th, almost exactly a year after Patricia's letter had started the whole mess. I was up at 4 a.m. again, climbing into my Peterbilt with a travel mug of coffee, ready to clear the roads. Marcus followed in the Ford, and we worked as a team, efficient and professional. By noon, all of our contracted areas were clear. I drove through Eagle Ridge slowly, admiring our work. The roads were clean, safe, and well-maintained. Residents were out shoveling their driveways and waving as I passed. Everything was exactly as it should be. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda Wu. "Roads look great. Thank you for everything you do for our community." I smiled and pocketed the phone, then pointed my truck toward home. As I drove, I thought about how much had changed in a year. I'd gone from being just another resident to being a valued service provider. I'd stood up to an abusive HOA president and won. I'd expanded my business and hired an employee. Most importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the right thing to do is the hard thing, the uncomfortable thing, the thing that requires you to stand your ground even when everyone's telling you to back down. Patricia had tried to bully me into free labor, thinking she could use her position and authority to force compliance. Instead, she'd inadvertently shown me a business opportunity and taught me exactly how much my skills and equipment were worth. She'd also learned, the hard way, that authority without wisdom is dangerous, and that treating people as tools rather than humans has consequences. The Eagle and Eagle Ridge probably never anticipated the drama its namesake community would see that winter. But then again, eagles are survivors. They adapt, they persevere, and they soar above the storms. I like to think our community had done the same. As I pulled into my driveway and parked the Peterbilt, I looked up at the mountains where snow was already accumulating for the next storm. I'd be out there again tomorrow or the next day, clearing roads, keeping people safe, doing the work I was meant to do. And somewhere in Billings, Patricia Henderson was probably living her life, hopefully wiser and more humble than before. I didn't hate her. I actually hoped she was doing well. She'd caused me a lot of trouble, but in a strange way, she'd also given me a gift, the chance to stand up for myself and to discover just how much I was capable of when pushed. The community had moved on. The HOA was functioning properly under good leadership. The roads would be clear all winter long, and I had a thriving business doing work I loved in a place I called home. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just living well, doing good work, and proving that integrity and professionalism matter more than authority and intimidation. I went inside, made myself dinner, and settled onto my couch with my dog, a golden retriever named Copper who'd been with me through the whole saga. He put his head on my lap and I scratched his ears, feeling content in a way I hadn't in years. Outside, the snow was falling again, soft and steady. Tomorrow I'd be up early, back in the truck, back to work. But tonight, I was just a man in his home, warm and safe, surrounded by the peaceful darkness of a Montana winter evening. The HOA had demanded I plow community roads, not knowing I owned the only plow truck in the county. They'd learned that lesson the hard way. And in the process, everyone involved had learned something about fairness, respect, and the importance of thinking through consequences before making demands. It was a good lesson. An expensive one for Patricia, a profitable one for me, and an educational one for the entire community. But good lessons often are expensive, and the best education comes from experience rather than books. I raised a glass of whiskey to the window, toasting the snow and the mountains and the strange, winding path that had brought me here. Then I drank, set the glass down, and called it a night. Tomorrow would bring more snow, more work, more challenges. But I was ready for all of it. I had my truck, my skills, my integrity, and my stubborn refusal to be pushed around by anyone. That was more than enough. The years following that tumultuous winter settled into a comfortable rhythm. My business continued to grow, eventually expanding to cover most of the county. I hired 3 more employees, bought another truck, and moved into a proper office space in town instead of running everything from my kitchen table. Marcus, my first hire, became my operations manager, proving himself reliable and skilled beyond his years. Eagle Ridge remained my favorite contract, though. There was something special about that community, forged perhaps in the fire of conflict and rebuilt with genuine care for what mattered. Linda Wu served as HOA president for 3 more years before stepping down to focus on her grandchildren. The person who replaced her was just as competent and reasonable, continuing the tradition of functional, fair governance that Linda had established. I never saw Patricia Henderson again after her sentencing, but I heard updates occasionally through Jason, who became a friend over the years. Patricia had indeed started fresh in Billings, volunteering at a community garden and staying far away from any positions of authority. Jason said she'd become gentler, more willing to listen, more aware of how her actions affected others. The whole experience had humbled her in ways that probably needed to happen. Doug Martinez and I remained close friends. He often joked that he'd had a front-row seat to the best drama Eagle Ridge had ever seen. We'd sit on his porch during summer evenings, drinking beer and watching the sun set over the mountains, occasionally reminiscing about that crazy winter when an HOA president thought she could force a professional snow removal operator to work for free. You know what the funniest part was? Doug said one evening, years later, Patricia actually thought she was being fair by spreading the work around to everyone. She genuinely believed that was more equitable than hiring you. It would have been, I said, if the work had been something reasonable, like organizing a community cleanup day or volunteering at the community center. But commercial snow removal, that was never going to work. She just couldn't admit she was wrong. That was always her problem. Most people have trouble with that, I said. The difference is most people don't have the authority to turn their mistakes into other people's problems. The lesson from that winter stayed with me through everything that came after. When I was dealing with difficult clients, when I was making business decisions, when I was training new employees, I always remembered what happened when authority got disconnected from reality and accountability. I made sure my business operated with transparency and fairness. I paid my employees well, maintained my equipment properly, and never promised something I couldn't deliver. When clients asked for unreasonable things, I explained why they were unreasonable instead of just agreeing to keep them happy. And I never, ever used my position as a business owner to bully or manipulate people into doing what I wanted, the business continued to thrive. By the 5th year after that winter, I was running the largest snow removal operation in 3 counties, employing 12 people year-round and more than 20 during winter season. We'd expanded into other services too: landscaping, construction, property maintenance. The little company I'd brought from Minnesota had become a significant employer in the region. Eagle Ridge kept growing too. New families moved in, attracted by the beautiful location and the reputation of a well-run HOA. The community that had almost torn itself apart over Patricia's snow removal scheme became known as one of the best managed neighborhoods in Montana. Property values increased steadily. The community center got renovated. New amenities were added. And every winter, when the first snow fell, I was there with my trucks and my crew, keeping the roads clear and safe. It became a point of pride for the community that they had professional, reliable snow removal. Some of the newer residents didn't even know the story of how that came to be, but the old-timers remembered. They'd tell the story at neighborhood gatherings, usually with embellishments and laughter, about the HOA president who tried to force a professional snow removal operator to work for free, not knowing he owned the only commercial plow truck in the county. It became something of a legend, actually. A cautionary tale about HOA overreach and the importance of understanding what you're asking people to do. Other HOAs in the region referenced it when discussing their own policies. "We don't want to pull a Patricia Henderson," they'd say, meaning they didn't want to make demands without considering feasibility and fairness. As for me, I just kept doing what I did best: clearing snow, building things, maintaining property, and treating people with respect. The business I'd built on the foundation of standing up to an unreasonable HOA president became my legacy, something I was genuinely proud of. Looking back, I wouldn't change anything about what happened that winter. It was frustrating and stressful at the time, but it taught me valuable lessons about standing up for myself, about the importance of documentation and legal protection, and about how conflicts can sometimes lead to unexpected opportunities. Patricia's attempt to bully me into free labor had backfired spectacularly, but in a way, both of us ended up better for it. She got the wake-up call she needed about her behavior and found a new path in life. I got a thriving business and a deeper connection to my community. Sometimes the best outcomes come from the worst conflicts. Sometimes standing your ground, even when it's difficult and uncertain, leads to something better than you could have imagined. And sometimes the thing that feels like the biggest problem in your life is actually the biggest opportunity in disguise. That winter taught me all of that and more. It taught me the value of my skills and equipment. It taught me not to back down from bullies. It taught me that communities are made up of good people who just need good leadership to thrive. And it taught me that owning the only commercial plow truck in the county was worth a lot more than I'd realized. The sun set behind the mountains as I sat there remembering, painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of pink and gold. Tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, more opportunities. But tonight, I was content to sit and reflect on how far I'd come since that first threatening letter from Patricia Henderson arrived on a Tuesday morning back in November. The HOA had demanded I plow community roads. They just hadn't realized that demand would cost them $32,000 a year, would lead to their president's arrest and conviction, and would launch my business into regional prominence. They'd learned an expensive lesson about making demands without understanding the full situation. And I'd learned that sometimes the best response to unreasonable demands isn't anger or compliance, but calm professionalism and a willingness to stand your ground. It was a good lesson for everyone involved, the kind of lesson that shapes communities and builds character. The kind of lesson that makes you stronger, wiser, and more capable of handling whatever comes next. As the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to appear above the mountains, I finished my beer, said goodnight to Doug, and headed home to Copper and my warm house, and the life I'd built in this beautiful, challenging, wonderful place called Eagle Ridge, Montana. The snow would fall again tomorrow, and I'd be ready.